Hello, this is Franco.cabral broadcasting from the Honest Liar podcast, a conversation around finding the inner liar within all of us and leveraging the truth to create expansion across all areas of your life. Today's topic is the power of a two-sided conversation. At the beginning of this year, I set out to set some targets in January of 2019. And one of the targets that I set out was in the category of being, spirituality. You guys have heard me talk about the four domains or the four dimensions that I look to level up, and one of them is being. I remember writing down in the beginning of the year that my target is by the end of the year to define how I want to lead my children spiritually. And the main reason for that was I realized I wasn't leading myself spiritually. Therefore, I had no shot at leading my children spiritually. One of the things that I found and I looked into and started to read about was Buddhism. And I had never in the past studied Buddhism, I hadn't been to temple up until not too long ago. But I felt called to it for some reason. There was some pull from going to Buddhist temple, just being there, starting the studying process. And I started a one-sided conversation throughout the course of this year studying Buddhism. I've been to temple, I've listened to podcasts, I've read some books, and I started this self-discovery process, which is actually one of the reasons why Buddhism was something that I felt called to, is because Buddhism is all about, connecting with oneself and finding the middle way of peace and happiness within ourselves. And this is very much in line with the self-discovery process that I've been on over the last few years, which is why I believe that I was very connected to this concept of Buddhism. However, I reached a whole new height this past weekend when I went to a Buddhist meditation and Dharma discussion at the temple that I go to frequently in Carmel, New York. And it starts by having a meditation session. And the meditation session is basically in a room called Noble Silence. And it's just a big silent room with some mats on the floor where you sit, and there's no music, there's no guided meditation, which is very different than what I've been doing over the course of the last 2 years. There's an app, which I'm a huge fan of for meditation beginners, as I've been for the last 2 years, called Calm. And it has a daily meditation that it puts out with some great intentions, some great concepts, reflection. And it's a 10-minute daily game of meditation, which has been very powerful for me over the last 2 years. But it has music in the background. It has a woman guiding you through some different thoughts. And it helps in being more mindful in the moment. And what I thought meditation was about being mindful and being present in the moment. And not to say that meditation doesn't bring that in the moment, but I found a whole new understanding of what meditation was after this meditation session that I had, more specifically the Dharma discussion. But I'll get to that in a second. What I want to discuss is this concept of sitting still in silence. It's not actually easy. We live in a society where we're inundated with messages and sounds and distractions all day long. So the idea of just sitting still with nothing going on was actually a lot tougher than I thought to get to a place of empty space. First thing is I sit and I'm trying to figure out, if my posture is right. I can hear my thoughts, happening. Then I'm thinking there's noises around me. My eyes are closed. There's people, is somebody sitting next to me? Are they watching me? All these different stories that go in my mind when I'm trying to just sit in silence. And usually for the first 15, 20 minutes, that's what's going on in my head. And I'm trying to get to this empty space. And one of the things I realize is when I'm trying to do something while I'm meditating, I'm already set up for failure. Because meditating is really about just being and allowing yourself to be. It's not something you can really force yourself to do, and it takes some time and practice. But the meditation of just sitting in silence, I realized, was the next level of the game for me. Because at a certain point, the distractions of the music and the distractions of somebody's guided voice, while it helps me eliminate some of the distractions in my life, it still is somewhat of a distraction. And now that I understand why meditation is so valuable in a different context, which I'll explain in a second, I'm definitely going to be leveling up my game by focusing on more silence time and allowing myself to really work the muscle of my mind. So what I learned from this meditation, the Dharma actually after the meditation, is that meditation is not necessarily about being more mindful. Meditation is a process by which I can work the muscle of my mind so that it gives me the capability of being more mindful in the distracted world that I live in. So when I'm, working or driving somewhere or even in a sales call, I mentioned this to my sales team today, it's extremely important to be present in a sales call. I want to be observant of what the client's energy is like. I want to be listening very carefully to what their wants, what their needs are. And if I'm thinking about, what happened with my son this morning, or what do I have to do later, for my wife, or, getting home at a certain time, or the targets that I'm hunting, or a podcast that I need to record, it makes it really difficult for me to actually be present in the moment during that sales call. So I started to realize that the practice of meditation and the more that I can just sit in silence and work my mind, that is actually the muscle that's going to be able to create more mindfulness and ultimately happiness, because happiness is found in the moment in being present. Now, I learned a lot of other lessons throughout this Dharma discussion with this mentor that was great. He's been studying Buddhism for the last 20, 30 years. But one of the things that I realized is as I'm listening and learning and asking questions and involved in a discussion, because that's really what it wasn't just him preaching or talking about what the Buddha taught. It was a discussion and then questioning and understanding is the power of a two-sided conversation. Because all year, I really have just been having a one-sided conversation around the idea of Buddhism. I've been learning, I've been reading, I've been listening to podcasts, I've been studying, I've been going to the temple, but I haven't had somebody on the other end giving me feedback. I haven't been able to ask the questions that maybe I didn't understand. So those questions I've continued to have, but they've stopped my potential of growing because I've been having a one-sided conversation. And as I was able to ask questions and understand at a much deeper level, I realized, I was excited, first of all, because in this Dharma discussion, I learned more about Buddhism than I have in weeks and maybe months of studying Buddhism. And I was trying to identify, well, why is that? And it really was because it was a two-sided conversation. Now I had the opportunity to get feedback. Then I started to reflect on how I've leveled up in a lot of areas of my life. And I talked about the darkness that I was in just a few years ago, and all of the acceleration that I've experienced in my life. But when I go back and think about it, the areas that I've accelerated most in my life are the ones where I've been willing to make an investment in myself, both time, but more importantly, to hire a coach. In fitness this year, as you guys have heard on previous podcasts, I learned how to box. And that was an enormous undertaking for me that wouldn't have been possible and is something that I'm going to continue to be pursuing without the help of a coach. I've also been through countless hours and investments, dollars in personal development and working on myself and better understanding myself to be a better father, a better husband, a better leader in my business, a better man, better person. But my acceleration has happened most when I was willing to invest in hiring a coach. And that kept coming back to me as I was thinking of this Buddhism class that I went to, how powerful it is to have this two-sided conversation. Because here I was, and I would have continued meditating because it's something that I find a lot of peace in, a lot of power in, but I would have been meditating from a very different frame that now I'm going to meditate with. And that all came from the ability of having this two-sided conversation and getting feedback from this Buddhist teacher. So it also highlighted for me that this is a path that I'm going to continue to dive deeper into. The classes are something that served me tremendously, but it also gave me the opportunity to look at other aspects of my life that maybe aren't working as much as I'd like them to. Nutrition is something that I haven't quite figured out for me this year. Nutrition is something that I've struggled with in the past, and this year I hadn't really thought about too much because nutrition for me was tied around losing weight. Well, this year is probably the year that I've been most consistent with my weight, but I've realized as of recent that my nutrition has been slacking. And I'm not being optimal with how I treat my body for performance, but I also just realized is that I'm having a one-sided conversation with that. And for me to level up fastest, it probably would make a lot of sense to hire a nutritional coach. So my lesson for today is really just around the concept of a two-sided conversation and how it can accelerate growth in my life and the lives, of anybody listening to this call. So my ask of you today is figure out what's the area in your life that you feel you're lacking the most in, or you're most afraid of, or you're most uncertain about. And I'd have you consider hiring the right coach, not just any coach, but hiring the right coach can elevate your game exponentially in a much quicker fashion than you trying to have a one-sided conversation. Not to say don't take advantage of all the great information that's out there, but if you truly want to create expansion fast and the most accelerated way possible, I'd have you consider that hiring a coach, the right coach, is the best way to do it. So that's the message for today. Again, thank you for tuning in to the Honest Liar podcast, a conversation around finding the inner liar within all of us and leveraging the truth to create expansion across all areas of your life. If you have found value in today's podcast, again, please share with someone that you think will also find value. Also, please rate and review the show as it helps with spreading light, which is my mission. Thank you very much and have a wonderful day.